My 37F, husband 38M, and my affair partner met, and I don't know if it saved our marriage or destroyed it. Yesterday, as the title suggests, was a day I will never forget. Please accept my apologies for the length of this message. Believe it or not, I chopped certain areas to shorten the length. Anyway, I'd welcome any insight or advice anybody could provide me about my predicament. To provide some perspective, I 37F have been married to my husband 38M for 10 years. I had a physical affair with a guy last year for 3 weeks, despite the fact that we had been in touch for many months. My conscience couldn't handle it any longer, so I confessed. My marriage was, needless to say, ruined. My husband and I decided to work it out after some thought and meditation, despite the fact that the previous few months have been bumpy, which took a turn yesterday. My husband chauffeured me to a luxury resort. In my opinion, this was a huge chance to bond emotionally and maybe physically without the tiny one. Anyway, after about 10 minutes in the room, I heard a tap on the door, and it was my affair partner and his buddy. That was not what I expected. I felt ill to my stomach and began to weep as soon as I saw him. The only thing I wanted was to get out of that hotel and go someplace else. My husband pulled me aside and told me that he had hired a private investigator to seek him down. He found out where he lived, which I had no idea about, and invited him to a meeting. If he refused to meet, my husband threatened to go to his home and tell everything to his fiancée, whom I also had no idea he had. He was interested in learning all there was to know about our romance. Everything from how often we met to physical attributes to the itself was discussed. Of course, I told him how the affair began and other details, but I was cautious to discuss how my affair partner made me feel, and of course, because of the guilt and embarrassment I felt, I avoided doing so. But the major reason was because I didn't want to harm my spouse any longer. He's always been a little self-conscious about his physique and our relationship in general. Since I came clean about the affair, I've been seeing a therapist regularly. She told me that, when it comes to infidelity, males are more likely than women to focus on the aspects of the relationship. According to her, it was only when my husband expressed his need for closure and a greater understanding of what had occurred that I decided not to leave the hotel room. For all practical purposes, if I had walked out the door, our marriage would have ended. I'd never seen him appear so serious as he did when he said it to me and looked me straight in the eyes before. As a consequence, I decided to stay. To shorten a long story short, the conversation destroyed my spirits. My affair partner arranged for a friend to wait outside my husband's door and inform him of the situation. He detailed our meeting, the length of our conversation, the point at which we agreed to have a physical encounter with him, how often, when, and where we met. On the whole, there wasn't anything that hadn't already been addressed. As I previously said, he shared information with my husband that I had previously shared with him, but he made certain that no details were left out. The most heartbreaking part, though, was when my husband questioned him about why he was pursuing me, despite the fact that we may have attended the same high school. We never met. Because my husband and I were high school sweethearts, I didn't spend much time with other guys at the time of our marriage. He was the first and last love of my life. After seeing my picture on social media, he decided to contact me, and the rest is history. In response to my husband's questions about why he picked me, he answered that it was because I had a beautiful face and a wonderful rack. His reasoning was that, based on our conversations, he assumed I was unsatisfied and that he wanted to strike me. On the whole, he lied to me throughout the whole process in order to have with me later on. The word devastated doesn't come close to capturing how I felt. As soon as there were no more questions, my husband asked me to wait on the balcony while he chatted with the other gentleman. I agreed. After a little conversation, he proceeded to the toilet, and my spouse followed suit. A private investigator had been following him for 2 weeks when he began telling me about how he'd met the woman from the affluent family and had found that they were engaged to be married. Our conversation revolved on the fact that she was most likely his meal ticket, and that I was most likely not his first affair. In any case, we spoke about the horrible conversation that had taken place. Despite the fact that I'm not sure how long it took, my affair partner finally emerged from the shower in a bathrobe. When my husband and I returned, he had disrobed and was completely naked, complete with a full-on erection, and we were shocked. My spouse continued to gaze at him despite my efforts to quickly move away from him. After what seemed like a lifetime, he told the man to get dressed and warned him that if he ever saw him near me again, he would inform his wife and do all he could to make his life miserable. He then left. As a consequence, he decided to leave. To say I was taken aback would be an understatement. Later, my husband said that he had given him 2 Viagra pills to see how big his was since I wouldn't tell him how big it was. He wanted to know whether he was still up to par, and now that he knows the answer, he begins to cry, which causes me to shed a few tears as well. He then confessed to me that he was a pig who preyed on female prey, which I found shocking. He did say that he was glad he met him, because it let him see how inattentive he had been to me and how it had led me to meet someone like him. It was important to me to take responsibility for the affair, but my husband was not on board with the idea. He made a promise to himself that he would be a better dad, friend, and husband. And now I've arrived. To be really honest, I couldn't sleep last night. We were ultimately able to return home. That hotel room would never be my choice to stay in. However, the issue is that I'm not really sure how I feel about what happened that day. Even if you told me a year ago that my husband was capable of anything like this, much alone going to such extremes, I wouldn't have believed you a little. So does anybody have any ideas or recommendations? Despite the fact that I admire him, I'm not sure whether the price is too high. Not only does it apply to our lives, but it also applies to our whole relationship. Is this something from which we will be able to recover? Any aid you could provide would be much appreciated. Story 2. Cheated on my 31F partner, 33M, of 8 years. After 8 years of being together, my boyfriend, 33M, and I, 32F, realized that there was no one else I could ever love as much as him. Those previous 2 or 3 years, on the other hand, have been quite challenging, to put it mildly. He's been quite verbally and emotionally abusive as well as physically aggressive at times, but nothing too serious. Things like grabbing my wrist or pushing me are all that he does. No matter what we've done, nothing seems to be successful. It's the same cycle over and over again, and I've reached a point where I don't know how to break free. In order to avoid portraying him in a bad light, I want to emphasize that he can and does act in a kind, considerate, and helpful manner at times, just as I am not perfect myself. Recently, we got into a furious argument that ended with him raging at me and stating that we were no longer together, followed by him exiting the house. On the next day, we didn't really talk at all, and then he just apologized and overcompensated by being quite loving. After that conflict, something broke in me, and I went into hibernation. Those feelings haven't returned since then. I still care about and adore him, and I have a very deep emotional attachment to him, but it simply feels like it's over for us. I try to stop him, but he either doesn't take my warnings seriously, or it just leads to another nasty dispute between us. Anyway, a new employee, 28NB, began working at my company about that time and began flirting with me on a regular basis. My first reaction to them was that they were not very attractive, but as time went on, I realized how attractive they are and developed a romantic attachment to them. They kissed me when we were having drinks after work one night. I was mortified. As soon as I told them of my marital difficulties, they were wonderfully kind and compassionate without being overwhelming. I also exaggerated when I said that we were completely separated. We ended up having a great time that night, and because my partner was out of town, I invited them back home, but I later changed my mind and made up an explanation for them. I've been texting and FaceTiming with this person continuously, and I've developed a strong romantic interest in them. Despite the fact that I met with them a few days ago with the intention of terminating things, I ended up having so much fun with them that I couldn't. What should I do now? My partner has noticed that something is wrong, and I'm at a loss for what to do. Should I tell my partner the truth? Should I break up with this person? Or should I do both? Despite the fact that I think I need some alone time, I am frightened of leaving my lover and do not have access to other housing.